Good to have you with us on a Monday morning. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. We begin with the wildfires raging on both sides of the country. Weather conditions are now offering some relief, but the situation is far from over.
On the West Coast, crews in Southern California are starting to gain control of the 20,000-acre mountain fire. But some residents in Ventura County have already lost everything. Fires aren't just a problem out west. In the Northeast, bone-dry conditions triggered fire alerts for 11 million people on Sunday. Firefighters in New Jersey say they are running ragged as they battle the so-called Jennings Creek wildfire along the border with New York. Dozens of brush fires have been burning in that region for days.
An 18-year-old New York State Parks employee was killed Saturday while battling the flames. Now, even with some much-needed rain overnight, fire officials are not getting their hopes up.
Make no mistake, though precipitation is forecasted, that's not going to solve the problem that we have here with this wildfire. It's inevitable that this fire is going to continue to burn up until it reaches our control lines.
We have NBC News meteorologist Michelle Grossman standing by with the latest forecast, and NBC News correspondent George Solis reporting for us on the ground. Let's start with George, who is in Mahwah, New Jersey. George, wildfires have been burning in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York. We could smell it in New York City over the weekend. Did rain a little bit overnight. Is that having any impact at all?
Hey, good morning, Joe and Savannah. We've had some measurable rain, which is a great start, but fire officials saying, look, it's not going to be enough to really saturate these dry conditions here. I mean, you can hear some of the brush here. It is just dry out here, which has really just been the fuel for these fires that have been raging here over the last several days. But fire officials really giving us some interesting context. They're saying since October 1st, they've had 537 wildfires in the state of New Jersey alone, which is why you heard fire officials say their crews are running ragged. And, of course, this large fire here, the Jennings Creek fire, they have some containment on it, about 10%, but about 3,000 acres are burning right now. And again, that rain is so crucial to give them that upper hand. But guys, with these dry conditions, they know it's going to be an uphill battle, and they believe they won't have this completely under control, at least through the end of the week. Guys?
George, a moment ago, I mentioned the young man who died battling the fire in New York. There will be a memorial service today. What are we learning about him?
Yeah, we're learning his name is Daryl Vasquez, 18 years old. He worked for the state park service for New York, and we're hearing that he died trying to make sure this fire would not spread. We understand he was actually helping clean up tree debris, and unfortunately a tree actually fell on him, according to officials. And of course, making the situation already difficult for firefighters. Now you have the loss of one of their own here, really just complicating things. We're hearing today there's going to be a vigil at this young man's high school in remembrance of it. So obviously, not only are the firefighters dealing with these brutal conditions, this tough terrain out here, now they're also grappling with the loss of one of their own, guys.
A reminder of just
high school.
Yeah, all the risks that these crews are taking as they try to keep all of us safe. George, let's talk about the West Coast. As far as the situation in Southern California is concerned, sounds like they're starting to get a handle on the mountain fire. Where do things stand, and just what is the scale of the destruction left behind so far?
Yeah, it is a massive fire out there, which is what we're used to seeing when you talk about wildfire. Some of those harrowing images, more than 20,000 acres. Last check, about 30% containment, which is pretty good. They're making some good progress there. Over the weekend, there was some if you will, lessening of the Santa Ana winds, which kind of gave the firefighters an opportunity to really catch up. But nevertheless, obviously, you still have that inferno out there, turning some of those images that you're seeing, really just those hellscapes of what could be just otherwise beautiful fall scenery. Not the case out there. We're seeing and starting to hear from some of the residents going back into their homes in those areas, and they are just dumbfounded by what they are finding. Complete remnants, just what was left of their homes. Just really, really shocking images. I believe we have some sound from some of those officials out there. Take a listen.
We kind of have nothing left but our family, so it really just makes you think of, is it all worth it keeping a bunch of things, or is it more just staying in contact with family and just being there for each other?
Yeah, again, just hearing what these residents are going through. The good news here, though, no mandatory evacuations. The fire is starting to creep up in some areas, so people are asked to voluntarily evacuate if they feel it's necessary. But again, as I mentioned, this is going to be an uphill battle for many firefighters, so they hope to get this under control by the end of the week. Guys?
These fires do put a lot of things into perspective. All right, George, thank you so much.
Well, for more on what to expect here, let's get a check on your morning news now weather.
Meteorologist Michelle Grossman is tracking everything. Michelle, good morning.
Good morning, guys. And unfortunately, we're going to see that fire threat continuing. We had the rain that moved through the Northeast, most of it off the coast at this point, didn't put a dent in the drought and didn't extinguish the fire. So we are still looking at staggering numbers across the country in terms of the drought monitor. 87% of the lower 48 states in a drought, 49 states reporting some sort of drought. You can see all these numbers here corresponding to moderate, severe, extreme. Where you see the red, that's extreme. The darker red is exceptional. So we are looking at some spots in that exceptional range. The Northeast, I mentioned that rain that came through, not a whole lot. Now we needed it. We'll take any we can get, but we still need more. And we're not going to see rain in the Northeast at least for 7 days, at least for most of the Northeast. 57% in a moderate drought, 20% of the region now in severe drought, where you see those darker colors once again corresponding to those extreme numbers. Now, as we go throughout the rest of today, we're going to dry it out in portions of the Northeast. May see some lingering showers in the Great Lakes, parts of the Carolinas, the Gulf Coast states, spotty rain. Some could be heavy, some of the showers, as we go throughout this Monday. Otherwise, we're dry throughout most of the country. It's back to the west where we're looking at a series of storm systems moving onshore. This is where most of the active weather will be this week. We have an atmospheric river, a series of fronts that will be moving through, and that's going to bring a lot of rain in some spots. It's going to bring some pretty heavy mountain snow as well. So where you see those darker colors, that's where we're expecting the heaviest amounts of rain. The blue is where we're expecting the snow. The lighter blue is the heavier amounts of snow. Then as we go by Wednesday, still active in the west. That's pushing into the Rockies. We had all that snow in Denver, and we're going to see more into the Intermountain West. Now on Wednesday, the rain will be situated from the Midwest throughout parts of the Great Lakes into the south central states or the Gulf Coast states. And we could be heavy at times, but we're going to be dry still on Wednesday throughout the Northeast. Really warm today, but we're back to more seasonal temperatures by Wednesday. Friday, keeping it dry once again. The only precipitation in the Northeast will be parts of New England where we could see some snow, especially in Maine. Wintry impacts throughout the Northwest, the Intermountain West, and gosh, that's going to be really active as we go throughout the week. That's going to be one to watch throughout most of this work week. Mild temperatures throughout the Midwest into the Great Lakes. November highs throughout the Southeast, but really notice a lot of us are going to be dry throughout the week. Let's talk about the storm system in the Northeast this morning. It's moving out. We're going to see those clouds clearing. Then, unfortunately, the winds pick up tomorrow, so we're going to see that fire threat really increasing once again tomorrow.
It was just incredible over the weekend, walking around New York City, the smell of smoke. Yeah. And people kept saying, they're like, where's that coming from? And I would go, New Jersey, it's wildfires.
And Prospect Park, Brooklyn.
Yeah.
You know, we smelled that a couple summers ago or last summer from Canada. So that's what you're expecting, but it's right on our doorstep.
Oh, and growing up, and you've lived in California too, it takes you right back to that wildfires.
Oh, I bet.
Brooklyn. All right, Michelle, a lot to watch. Thank you.
Sure.
Turning now to politics in a big week ahead in President-elect Trump's transition.
Yeah, Mr. Trump and President Biden are set to meet on Wednesday in the White House. It will be their first meeting since they debated each other, you remember, back in June. Meanwhile, the president-elect announced on social media over the weekend that Tom Homan, the former acting director of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, will become his incoming administration's border czar. For the latest, we're joined now by NBC News White House correspondent Aaron Gilchrist and NBC News correspondent Von Hilliard, who covered the Trump campaign. Good morning to both of you. Aaron, let's begin with you, as President Biden is set to host the president-elect on Wednesday. They have not seen each other since that June debate, which eventually led to Mr. Biden dropping out of the race. What can we expect in this meeting?
Yeah, Wednesday morning at 11 a.m., this meeting is going to happen in the Oval Office at the White House. Again, as you noted, the first time these two men will have been in the same room together since that debate in the summer of this year. And as we understand it from the president's national security advisor, who was on television yesterday when he was asked about what would happen in this meeting, he said that this would be an opportunity for President Biden to talk about some of the things that he believes are important domestic and foreign policy issues that he would sort of update the incoming president on and explain to him how he sees things and give an opportunity to President-elect Trump to talk about how he sees things as well. This also really is a meeting that is more about showing the American people this transition of power, how it all begins right from the top with the incoming president and the outgoing president sitting together. And President Biden said last week that it was going to be a smooth, peaceful transfer of power. And this really is the first step in that process. Of course, we know this was a step that was not afforded to President-elect Biden when President Trump was in office. He didn't invite Biden to the White House, didn't concede the election really until after January 6th and the riot that we saw at the Capitol. And so, again, this is an opportunity to return to a norm, something we saw President Obama do when President Trump was elected initially. And we've seen all the way back to Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan, guys.
Vaughn, let's bring you in here, and I want to ask you about something that might seem a little wonky or kind of inside baseball, but it's important. So when you take on a top job in a new administration, there's a lot of paperwork, right, that goes along with it. There are ethics disclosures regarding fundraising limits, conflicts of interest. Those haven't been signed yet by the Trump team. They were due more than a month ago. Some political experts warn it could cause delays in getting his new administration in place. But explain to us how important these documents are, how unusual this is, and what ultimately happens if they're not signed.
Right. I think there are questions also about to what extent will this represent not only the transition, but also the incoming White House administration under Donald Trump. By bucking these norms and these standards, right, when we're talking about the financial disclosure forms, that is part of the concern by not signing these agreements, that they are not having to turn over to the federal government some of the funding resources here. This for the transition, it's based out of Palm Beach right now. I'm told that there are major decisions that are going to be announced by the transition tomorrow after Veterans Day. That includes who the executive director is for the transition. That includes whether they're going to be based out of Palm Beach or whether they'll be based out of D.C. But really what this holds up them from doing is being able to effectively move into office space in Washington, D.C., as they did 8 years ago. When you're looking to have to fill 4,000 political appointee jobs, there's a lot of manpower and resources that have to go in to doing that over the course of 2 months. And it's more than just filling out the top cabinet posts, the Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, but it is everybody that is underneath them here. And this simply slows up the process of their ability to work with the Biden administration and the department and agency level to begin truly that transition process in an effective manner.
Aaron, let's talk about an appointment already making headlines. Proposed mass deportations, big part of what's been promised in the first days of President-elect Trump's second term. So what should we know about this Tom Homan, his choice to become border czar and tackle immigration? History does give us some clues, right?
Yeah, I think you're right. And President-elect Trump made this announcement on his social media platform late last night that Tom Homan would be the border czar, seeming to suggest this would be a new position that would be created in this Trump administration. And he would be in charge of, according to this post on social media, he would be in charge of securing the southern border, the northern border, air, sea borders as well. And he would be in charge of this mass deportation effort that President-elect Trump talked about all through the campaign, saying this is something that he would execute. And it seems as though Tom Homan is a hardliner who is very much in lockstep with President-elect Trump's thinking. He's a former Border Patrol agent who was the acting director of the Immigration and Custom Enforcement Agency for a time during the Trump administration. He supported former President Trump's zero tolerance policy during his time in office before that led to family separations for a time as well. And he seems to support this idea of mass deportation during the upcoming Trump administration. He said during an interview that he believed there was a way to do this mass deportation without separating families, by deporting entire families if necessary, also suggesting that that would be an effort that would be well-planned and structured and humane, is the way that he described it when talking to Fox News about this mass deportation effort that is very likely going to be early on in the Trump administration.
Vaughn, something else we know will be early on, this idea of tackling taxes. It's one of President-elect Trump's known priorities when he takes office again. He had signed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act into law back in 2017. It included changes that lowered individual tax income rates, and it also increased the child tax credit. It's set to expire next year. What would a new Trump tax plan potentially look like? And then what obstacles could that face in getting it approved?
Right. This was a big component of not only his campaign, but also other Republicans who said it was a necessity to get not only a Republican in the White House, but also majorities in the Senate and the House in order to further and extend these tax cuts. But Donald Trump is suggesting of going even further, lowering the corporate tax rate even further. He looked at that graphic there where he also talked about no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security. But he has also called for the reimplementation of deductions on SALT deductions, which is state and local tax deductions from federal from federal accounts. This is for Donald Trump a key component here, though, that one is raise some concern among economists and Democrats who say that the proposals that Donald Trump has put forward would only further the deficit, and that there is not enough revenue coming in to also at the same time make up for the spending proposals that he, for instance, his mass deportation plan that he put out there during his campaign. So we will see what kind of not only pushback from Democrats there is, but even more so from the fiscal conservatives up on Capitol Hill, who may be concerned about expanding the deficit under a second Trump administration. We should note that there was the first Trump administration added to the deficit more than any other president administration prior.
All right, Aaron and Vaughn on the early stages of the transition. Thank you both.
Well, Democrats are still reeling following last week's election loss and trying to figure out what went wrong. Exit polling shows that for the first time in decades, Democrats received more support from high-income voters this election than lower-income households. Well, that data point prompted a scathing rebuke from Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, an independent who caucuses with Democrats. Sanders joined Kristen Walker yesterday on Meet the Press to discuss the party's path forward.
Hello there, Joe and Savannah. This week on Meet the Press, I spoke to Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders about the future of the Democratic Party after Harris's defeat. You know, I've been speaking to some Democrats who are concerned because now President-elect Trump has beaten 2 women candidates, and their concern is that it will make it more difficult to nominate a woman candidate in the future. Do you share that concern, Senator?
No, I don't. I think it's not a question. Look, I'm not going to deny that there is sexism in this country, that there's racism, there's homophobia. It's there. But on the other hand, I think what the American people want to support, whether it's a woman, a man, a black or a white or Latino, whatever, is they want to support somebody who is standing up, Kristen, and fighting for them. People are in pain. People are hurting. They can't afford to go to a doctor. They can't afford to send their kids to childcare or to college. They're worried about future generations and what kind of standard of living they will have. The Democrats need an explanation, and that explanation is corporate greed and the power of the billionaire class. I know that's uncomfortable for people in the Democratic Party, some people, but that is the issue we have to address.
You can see my full interview and a lot more at MeetThePress.com. You can also get more Meet the Press right here on NBC News Now every weekday at 4 p.m.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.